Nguyen, who is VP for Southeast Asia and India, and he will be speaking at the AdTech show this year in Singapore. Joe, I'd like you to tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to comScore. I know that you've worked in a hotel and Discovery Channel. Perhaps you could just tell me a little bit about how you eventually arrived here.
When I was born in Vietnam during the war. Left in '79 by boat. Went to Malaysia for a year as a refugee, and then went to the U.S. in 1980. Grew up in the U.S. and then came to Singapore and Nguyen back in '93 to be a lecturer at Nguyen Polytechnic. And I didn't want to be an engineer anymore, and got into media, and now research. But yeah, so over the years, I've worked for Discovery Channel, worked for hotel group, Millennium Kaufman Hotels, which is owned by CDL here, and I've actually done research, even before then. We had a startup doing what comScore does back in 2000.
comScore is a major digital measurement company in the USA, and I understand you've been in Asia now for 2 years. Can you tell me what made you come over here? What made the company decide to set up an office in Singapore?
It was general expansion, but it was a bit slower than what many people would have wanted. One of our clients would have wanted. We've had data for Asia for 5-6 years. Some of our data do go back, about 5 or 6 years. It's just that we didn't have anyone on the ground. We had an office in Japan with a few people in Japan before I came on board 2 years ago. So I was the first person outside of Japan, and we just keep on growing. Now we have about 15 people in the region. Offices in Sydney, Mumbai, Delhi, Hong Kong, obviously here, and Beijing.
In the comScore World Matrix of 2009, there were some interesting figures about Singapore. Let me just read you those. Based on time spent, messaging was over 24%, entertainment was 13.8%, and social networking was a mere 8%. Now, have you noticed any changes since that study was done?
We've seen change in how people spend their time online. A lot more people are getting on social networks and spending a lot of time on social networks like Facebook, Twitter. Social networks as a category now reaches 96% of all Singaporeans. So, 96% of Singaporeans online do some kind of social network. Maybe it's Foursquare, maybe it's Facebook, maybe it's MySpace or Twitter. And that's grown huge. Messaging, instant messaging, we've seen over the years has slight decline. Facebook now has instant messenger capabilities, so you might not go to your old instant messenger and still use that. Email, web email has shown decrease in online usage as well, because people can actually get their mails on their mobiles and things like that. So people are going to the computers less often to check what they're making, things like that.
What is the methodology you're using, and how often are you bringing out reports now?
Our methodology and how we collect data is more like how TV measurement collects data. So if you go back to TV panels and you understand how they work, they recruit households with people meters, with diaries, and they track what they watch. Now there are these clickers, and then they project that up to the population. So say in Singapore, I believe there's probably about 1,000 households that are being monitored, and that's projected up to the population and produces ratings, which hundreds of millions of dollars are being spent on based on these ratings. We do some of the things. We recruit people, we track what they do with their permission, and then we project it up to the population. So that's it's a perpetual data collection that always happens. And in Singapore, we track about 50,000 people. So compare this, what we do online to the TV panel, it's a whole different world. But it's not 100 TV channels, it's 2 million websites that potentially people could go to. So it's a different scale of things when it comes to online.
That's quite a large number that you're recording. Would you have similar numbers in other countries?
50,000, we probably have about the same in Japan. In Malaysia, we actually have more, about over 100,000. In China, we have a couple 100,000. In India, we have 800,000. We don't. There's a minimum for us, and minimum is way below 50,000. If you look at it from a sample size perspective, the more you have, the deeper you can go with the data. So, if I have 5,000 people, and I'm only tracking 20 sites, the top 20 sites, I'll get them correctly. If I have 50,000 people, we go down to the top 5,000 sites or so in Singapore, right? And so we get more granular with the data, and you can break it up a bit more. So the more people, the more granular you can actually report the data, and online it's more about how deep you can go with some of the data. So it's we perpetually want to get more people. It's a monthly report. It gets published about 2 or 3 weeks after the end of the month. So our subscribers will get access to it, and they will access it. So next week is when May data will come out.
When the large companies like, say, Nestle, P&G, Unilever commission you, what would they be asking you to do?
In particular with those brands, what we've launched last year was something we call ad effectiveness for digital. So effectively what we do is we tag the campaign for a product launch or something like an online campaign. Every single ad we would tag, and we would report on internet GRP. So what demographic group, age, gender did that ad reach, and which publisher was more effective, which creative was more effective at reaching that target demographic group. So that's what these P&Gs and these guys want. They're about branding. It's about brand marketing. It's about reach and frequency. It's not about the click-through rates and the impressions and everything that digital has been talking about for years. These brands just want to make sure that people are aware of their brand and then go and buy it in the store. Right? So, and these are where the big advertising dollars come in. And this is what we do for them, ad effectiveness, which is something that you can't do in other media. Unless you can do surveys and things like that, but not at this granular, not every single campaign. We can conduct surveys, just like anyone else. So we can follow, let's say a campaign is exposed to someone, and then see if they actually search for the brand term, search for brand keywords, and then survey them a bit later and say, did you go and buy? What did you buy? And those kinds of things. So we can do those qualitative surveys. In the U.S., it's where there are companies like dunnhumby that has retail point-of-sale databases. We do one-to-one match with them, so then we actually do have an understanding that what they see and what they eventually buy. And that's really the end product. And again, it's not available here, not at this point in time, but where it is, we work with a lot of other research companies to actually deliver that whole chain.
The final question for you, what are you going to be talking about this year at AdTech?
I'm talking about marketing to women.
Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, so it's a lot of, we actually have a lot of data. We segment it by age and gender. So I was looking through a lot of data to see how different do women surf than men. Singapore in particular is one of the countries where there are more women than men on the internet. And that's one of the few countries in the world where that's true. We also see things like social networks. Women tend to spend more time. Twitter users, there's more Twitter users who are, there's a big gap between men and women. Women tend to Twitter more. And I've seen that in other markets as well. So these little things, why are they different? What kind of sites do they tend to consume? They also tend to consume more travel sites. Things like that. That's what I'll be presenting. Where do you find these women online?
Thanks very much for spending your time with AdAsia.